The bright lights of Studio 6B glowed across the stage as the audience erupted into applause. Jimmy Fallon stood smiling in the center of the room, introducing one of Hollywood's fastest-rising young stars. But the second Sadie Sink stepped through those curtains, something felt different. The crowd cheered loudly. Jimmy smiled and welcomed her warmly. Sadie smiled back, waving to the audience with her usual grace and calm energy. At first glance, it looked like a completely normal celebrity interview. Another fun late-night appearance. Another cheerful night on television. But fans watching closely would later say they noticed something unusual almost immediately. There was something in Sadie's expression. Something subtle. Something thoughtful. Because while she smiled politely and laughed with Jimmy's opening jokes, her eyes carried a seriousness that felt deeper than usual. And many viewers online would later point out the exact same thing. Sadie seemed more mature, more reflective, almost emotional. Jimmy welcomed her back to the show, joking with her as he normally does. The audience laughed as they exchanged playful banter. Sadie laughed too. But then Jimmy brought up something that instantly changed the tone of the room. He mentioned Stranger Things. And the second those words left his mouth, everything shifted. Because everyone knew why that topic mattered so much. For years, Stranger Things had not only made Sadie Sink a household name, it had completely transformed her life. It turned her into one of the most recognizable young actresses in the world. It gave her a role fans would remember forever. And most importantly, it gave her a connection with millions of people across the globe. But now, that chapter was coming to an end. Jimmy leaned in with curiosity, smiling as he asked her about the final season, the ending, and the many fan theories surrounding the story. At first, Sadie smiled softly. But then, she paused. And that pause told viewers everything. It wasn't a long pause. Only a second or two. But in live television, moments like that matter. Because when celebrities are media-trained, polished, and rehearsed, they rarely pause unless they genuinely feel something. Sadie's face softened. Her smile faded slightly. And suddenly, what began as a fun interview started feeling far more personal. She began speaking carefully, choosing her words with visible thought. You could hear it in her tone. This wasn't just another actress casually discussing a role. This was someone reflecting on a life-changing chapter of her career. She spoke about the ending of the show, the emotions surrounding it, and how surreal it felt knowing that something so important was reaching its conclusion. And Jimmy, usually known for keeping interviews fast and funny, did something unexpected. He got quiet. He stopped joking. He simply listened. Because even he could tell this meant something much deeper than promotion. Sadie wasn't just answering questions. She was processing emotions in real time. And the audience could feel it. The energy in the room shifted from laughter to attention. People leaned forward, listening carefully. Because suddenly, this no longer felt like entertainment. It felt like witnessing someone say goodbye to a major part of their life. Sadie explained how much the experience had meant to her. How long she had been part of that world. How attached she had become to the cast, the story, and everything they had built together. And while she remained composed, there was emotion underneath every word. Fans online later said this moment hit them hard. Because for years, audiences had watched Sadie grow up on screen. But in this interview, for the first time, it felt like everyone was seeing just how much she herself had grown emotionally too. Jimmy smiled gently and asked more about the finale, wanting to know her personal thoughts. And once again, Sadie gave an answer that surprised everyone. Because instead of giving a simple promotional response, she gave something honest, real, heartfelt. She shared her thoughts openly, speaking with sincerity in a way fans rarely get from celebrities during polished press tours. And just like that, what should have been a normal late-night appearance became one of the most memorable interviews of her recent career. Because fans weren't just watching Sadie Sink promote a show anymore. They were watching a young actress reflect on the journey that changed her life forever. And as Jimmy smiled and prepared his next question, everyone in that room knew one thing. This interview had become much deeper than anyone expected. As the applause faded, Jimmy Fallon leaned back slightly in his chair, smiling warmly at Sadie. But even he seemed to realize this conversation had become more emotional than expected. The playful energy of the room had changed. And while Jimmy is famous for turning every interview into comedy, this time he let the moment breathe. Sadie sat calmly in her chair, hands folded together, smiling softly, but there was still that thoughtful expression in her eyes. Jimmy continued asking about the finale, about the fan theories, about everything people online had been saying. And when he asked Sadie what she personally thought about the ending, she gave an answer that immediately caught everyone's attention. She didn't rush. She didn't laugh it off. She took a breath first, then answered with complete honesty. The audience reacted instantly. Some laughed nervously. Others gasped softly, because Sadie wasn't playing it safe anymore. She was being genuine, and that honesty made the entire room fall silent. Jimmy looked surprised. Not shocked, but impressed, because instead of hearing another polished celebrity answer, he was hearing something real, something emotional. Sadie talked about what the ending meant to her emotionally, how difficult it was to accept the closing of that chapter, and how strange it felt knowing such an important part of her life was ending. Her words weren't dramatic, but her tone said everything. She sounded reflective, almost nostalgic, like someone remembering a moment they know they can never get back. And suddenly, millions of fans watching understood exactly what she was feeling, because they felt it too. For them, Stranger Things wasn't just ending for Sadie. It was ending for everyone. The audience could feel the emotion behind her words. Even Jimmy's face softened. He smiled gently, nodding while listening. And for a brief moment, the entire interview felt less like a late-night segment and more like a heartfelt conversation between friends. Then Jimmy shifted the discussion. He asked about what comes next. What's next for Sadie Sink after such a career-defining role? And instantly, Sadie's expression brightened. She smiled wider. Her tone became more hopeful. She began speaking about her future, new opportunities, and the excitement of stepping into a new phase of her life. Jimmy brought up her upcoming theater debut and her move into more serious acting roles. The audience cheered loudly. Jimmy praised her growth, praised her talent, praised how much she had evolved. And Sadie, smiling shyly, thanked him humbly. But even in that joyful moment, one thing was obvious. She still carried deep emotional attachment to the past. No matter how excited she was for the future, part of her heart still belonged to the journey she was leaving behind. And viewers noticed that immediately. Fans online later flooded comment sections saying the same thing. This feels like Sadie's goodbye to an era. And honestly, that's exactly what it felt like. Not just another interview, not just another press appearance, but the symbolic closing of one chapter, before beginning another. As the conversation moved forward, Jimmy Fallon could feel the weight of the moment slowly beginning to lift. The emotional discussion about Stranger Things had touched everyone in the room. But Jimmy knew exactly when to shift the atmosphere, because that's what made him one of television's most beloved hosts. He knew when to joke, when to listen, and most importantly, when to help a guest relax. Jimmy smiled, leaned forward in his chair, and with his usual playful tone, decided to steer the conversation in a lighter direction. He brought up another topic from Sadie's life, one that immediately made her laugh before she even answered. And in that moment, the serious, reflective version of Sadie that viewers had just watched suddenly transformed. Her shoulders relaxed. Her smile widened. Her laughter became louder and more natural. It was as if the emotional tension she had been carrying moments earlier finally melted away. And fans watching immediately noticed the contrast. Because within seconds, the interview no longer felt heavy. It felt warm, natural, almost personal. Jimmy began joking with Sadie about her recent experiences outside of acting, including the funny stories and awkward situations she had found herself in while balancing fame, travel, and her rapidly changing life. Sadie laughed as she shared one humorous memory after another, clearly more relaxed now than she had been earlier. The audience erupted with laughter several times as Jimmy playfully reacted to every detail she gave. And suddenly, the room felt alive again. The serious conversation had shown fans her emotional depth. But now, this part of the interview showed something equally important. Her personality. Because for years, many fans had only known Sadie through dramatic roles. They knew her as Max Mayfield, the fierce, emotional, complicated character from Stranger Things. But here, sitting beside Jimmy Fallon under bright studio lights, they were seeing something different. They were seeing Sadie herself. Not the actress. Not the character. Just Sadie. Funny. Awkward. Charming. And incredibly down-to-earth. Jimmy teased her about one of her stories, exaggerating parts of it in his typical comedic way, making the audience laugh even harder. Sadie covered her face for a second, laughing in embarrassment. And that tiny moment, simple as it was, became one of the most talked-about clips from the interview online. Because fans loved seeing her in that unfiltered way. Not overly polished. Not robotic. Not scripted. just real. And that authenticity is exactly what made the interview so memorable. Because unlike many celebrity appearances that feel carefully rehearsed, this one felt genuine. There was no forced energy, no fake excitement, no awkward promotional lines. Instead, it felt like two people naturally talking, laughing, enjoying the moment. And Jimmy could clearly sense the audience was loving every second of it. He leaned further into the playful side of the interview, joking more, teasing more, and giving Sadie opportunities to show more of her natural personality. The chemistry between them was undeniable. Every joke landed. Every story flowed effortlessly. And with each passing minute, Sadie seemed more comfortable, more confident, more open. Many fans online later pointed out that this might have been one of the most relaxed they had ever seen her in a public interview. Because while Sadie has always been admired for her acting talent, she has often been seen as reserved and private. But here, she was glowing, comfortable, engaged, happy, and people noticed. Comments began pouring in almost instantly after the episode aired. Fans praised her humor, her maturity, her calm confidence. Some even said this interview made them appreciate her even more than before, because while her acting had already won people over, her personality during this interview showed them a completely different side of her, a side that felt relatable, authentic, human. And as Jimmy prepared to transition into the next segment of the show, the audience was still buzzing from the laughter. But behind all the jokes and smiles, something deeper had quietly happened during that interview. Sadie Sink had shown the world not just who she is as an actress, but who she is as a person. And in Hollywood, that kind of authenticity is rare, very rare, because many stars spend years building perfect public images. They carefully control every word, every expression, every appearance. But Sadie? She didn't seem interested in pretending. She simply showed up and let people see the real her. And that honesty is exactly why so many fans connected with this interview on such a deep level. Because whether she was discussing emotional farewells, laughing through awkward stories, or joking with Jimmy Fallon, nothing about her felt fake. Everything felt sincere, natural, real. And by now, the audience in that studio knew one thing for certain. They weren't just watching another celebrity guest. They were watching someone becoming a true star in real time. The applause from the studio audience slowly faded, but the energy in the room was still high. Jimmy Fallon glanced at Sadie Sink with a knowing smile, like he could sense that the interview had reached a special kind of moment. Not planned, not scripted, just something real that had naturally unfolded. He leaned back slightly, tapping his desk lightly, then shifted the tone of the conversation once again. But this time, it wasn't about jokes. It was about reflection. Jimmy brought up how fast Sadie's life had changed since joining Stranger Things, from a young actress with small roles to one of the most recognized faces in the world. For a brief second, the laughter slowed. Sadie nodded thoughtfully, and the room listened, because even in a lighter interview setting, everyone could feel there was truth in what was being said. She talked about growing up in the industry, the pressure of sudden fame, and how strange it feels when millions of people start watching your every move before you even fully understand yourself. Her voice was calm, but honest. No exaggeration, no drama, just reality. Jimmy didn't interrupt. He simply let her speak. And that silence made everything more powerful. Then Sadie paused for a moment, smiling slightly, as if choosing her words carefully, and said something that quietly shifted the mood of the entire studio. She explained that fame looks exciting from the outside, but inside it often feels like you're still trying to stay grounded while everything around you moves too fast. The audience didn't react with laughter this time. They listened, fully, and for the first time in this interview, the energy became deeply still. Not uncomfortable, just real. Jimmy nodded slowly, acknowledging her words, and responded with a softer tone than before. He shared a brief, personal reflection of his own about the pressure of live television and expectations in entertainment. That small exchange created something rare, a moment of mutual understanding between host and guest. No spotlight competition, no performance, just honesty. Sadie then smiled again, this time lighter, and admitted that despite everything, she still feels incredibly grateful. Grateful for the fans, the show, the opportunities, and even the chaos that comes with it. Because it shaped her, made her stronger, made her more aware of who she is. And as she spoke, something subtle happened in the studio. The audience wasn't just watching her anymore. They were connecting with her. as a person, not a character, not a celebrity image, but someone real. Jimmy sensed the moment was reaching its natural conclusion, so he gently steered the conversation toward closing remarks. But instead of ending it quickly, he gave Sadie one final space to speak directly to her fans. She paused, looked straight ahead, and smiled softly. What she said next wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rehearsed. It was simple. She thanked the fans for growing up with her character, for the messages, the support, and for allowing her to evolve in public while still feeling accepted. And that honesty landed deeper than any scripted line ever could. The audience applauded, not loudly at first, but warmly, like they understood the weight of it. Jimmy stood up slightly, clapping and smiling, bringing back the light energy as the moment naturally dissolved into the usual show rhythm. Sadie laughed again, this time freely, and the tension from earlier was completely gone. But something had changed. Not just in the interview, but in how people would remember it. Because this wasn't just another celebrity appearance on a talk show. It had become a full experience. A journey from emotion, to laughter, to reflection, and back to warmth. As the camera slowly began to pull away, Jimmy gave his final sign-off, still smiling, still impressed by how naturally everything had unfolded. And Sadie? She waved at the audience with a genuine smile that didn't feel like performance at all. It felt like gratitude. Real gratitude. The kind that doesn't need words. And as the episode faded out, one thing became clear to everyone watching at home. Sometimes the most powerful moments on television aren't the scripted ones, but the ones where people simply let themselves be human.